I've solo queued into the highest rank in Marvel Rivals, one above all, and I'm currently doing a solo queue to Grandmaster series on every single hero. So here are the best tips that I can give you to win more games and climb your rank in Marvel Rivals, whether you go for a solo queue climb like me, or even if you want to play with friends or like-minded individuals. First and foremost, one of the biggest secrets to consistently climbing in rank, even though it might seem obvious, is playing the right heroes. Making sure you have a solid hero roster with 1 to 2 heroes that you can play on every role ensures you from getting into a situation where everyone is playing DPS and nobody knows how to play support or tank. Picking your main heroes can be a matter of preference, but I normally look into tier lists and picking one of the A or S tier heroes as your mains. This ensures that you can contribute as much as possible to your team, assuming you know how to play the heroes optimally. Sure, you can play non-meta heroes and still climb, but you'd be surprised how easy Marvel Rivals feels when you're playing heroes that actually are decent or in the meta, rather than the one who was in that one movie you like. This leads me to the next point, that being that your hero draft and Counterpick in enemy hero draft is the name of the game. If the composition is terrible, then you need to fix it. Ideally, you want to try to fix it before the game starts, but people are going to be stubborn and they really do not want to swap until you lose a round or a fight. And they definitely do not want to swap if they are playing DPS and you're playing DPS and you're asking them to go tank or something. But no matter what you do, never let anyone say, I'll swap if it doesn't work. That puts your team in a very common pitfall, and if you nip it in the bud and you fix it, your team will be so much better off. And that's because if you have a semblance of game sense and your lobbies are half decent, then a massive majority of the times, if not every single time, it won't work. And sometimes it takes these players forever to realize that their weird 4 DPS 1 support and tank composition isn't cutting it. Trying to diffuse a situation and get a good composition without pissing everyone off is very important. I always try to get everyone on their comfort pick so they can perform their best, and since I have a wide hero pool myself, I usually end up flexing into whatever is open, though I do try to play tank and a DPS if possible, as those are roles I enjoy playing and have the most impact on, but your own roles or picks might look a lot different. With that in mind, I make sure that I follow rule 1, playing the best heroes that I could at the moment. When I jump into a game, I usually make an effort to instantly pick the hero I think I'll be doing the best on in that game, which usually would be my main. If I'm in Diamond Plus and my main ends up getting banned, or if the composition calls for it, I oftentimes flex to something else under the role. Like if I start at a Vanguard, I might swap to some other relevant Vanguard, but if that doesn't work out, I often just end up playing some Strategist or whatever, Duelist. Whatever the comp calls for, I usually try to make sure that I play a hero that I can have an impact with first, and then make sure that all of my teammates have their comfort pick second. If somebody is a one trick on my main or the hero I want to play, then I often let them have the hero instead so that they can play their best, because this is the safe thing to do. One tricks are sadly called one tricks for a reason. They're usually not super reliable on anything else than their one trick hero, so just give them the hero. And even if they aren't the one trick, being able to flex is extremely important, because 99% of the players can't, especially with how early in the game's lifespan we currently are. And even if you're a better DPS or tank than that other guy, or you're a better Mantis player than the other guy, odds are you're probably a lot better at filling to your other comfort picks than they are playing anything that isn't their main. With all that being said, knowing when to sit back and take a carry is also very necessary. While the only common denominator across all games will be you, sometimes you're just not having a good day, or the matchmaking puts you with the best players in the world or something. If so, you just have to swallow your pride, let yourself get carried, and take that free win. Even if it means you have to pick a support hero and heal bot the hell out of your teammates, rather than looking for plays or massive clips yourself. Recognizing when you need to carry and when you need to sit back and play your team is key, and usually comes down to the skill level and the synergy of your random teammates. Moving on, something you easily can do to keep the team cohesion up is just counting ults. I usually try to keep track of what ultimates the enemies had used previously, and if you do the same, eventually you'll start being able to predict which ones they should have up almost intuitively. Some heroes, and especially some players on those heroes, will have an ult every fight, or in some cases they'll have it every other fight. It just comes down to game sense and testing your prediction skills, and even if you get it wrong a few times, eventually it starts flowing pretty smoothly. If you do an ult check with your team before the next fight, or right after a fight ended where you just double check what ultimates they did use, then just by communicating with your team, you can probably guess what ults they should have, and with a little bit of detective work, figure out what ultimates they're most likely to use. If you're talking with your team, then you could even strategize counter strats or counter ultimates for the specific strats that you're expecting from the enemy team. And even if you don't do a full plan with your team, just knowing what ultimates are up makes it easier to play for yourself and your teammates, if they are listening, to at least subconsciously play around it properly, either by adjusting their positioning, focusing the right target, or just reacting accordingly or faster once that ultimate eventually pops without all 6 of you being surprised. And it's especially good if you're playing a tank or supportive hero with crowd control or a shield, because knowing what ults are coming usually gives you a chance to pull off a counterplay that saves your entire team. Which brings me to my next point, which might be very obvious, but it clearly isn't obvious enough because nobody seems to be doing it, and that is communicating in general. Telling your teammates what you're doing or what you want to do, either through voice chat if you're comfortable with it, or text chat, makes a massive difference in how the games play out, and depending on your social skills, being able to figure out the problem of the game and then how to fix it, be it a bad pick or something on the enemy team that needs attention or needs a counter, can easily make or break the outcome of the game. If you don't know what to communicate other than ultimates, something that not even most tier 3 or even some tier 2 professional teams do is identifying your loss and win conditions. If you can figure out what your team needs to do to get a win, that fight, then tell your team exactly what outcome you need. You could suggest a way to get there or just let things play out their own way. So you could say something like, whoa, yeah, we need to kill that Spider-Man first because they can't just fall apart without him, or we need to focus the shield because as soon as their Doctor Strange is dead, we kind of just win. Because if everyone knows the outcome that you want, then it is more likely to end the way you need it to. In the same vein, identifying the loss condition can be equally as important. If your team knows what the enemy team needs and wants to do to get a win in the fight, then they might know what they need to focus to prevent that. For example, protecting the Doctor Strange a little bit extra so he can't just get ran down, or helping to offset the pressure on his shield by being close to him and poking back or really whatever, which would lead to much better results. And that will help you and your team to have a higher chance of winning. But if you feel like your teammates are distracting, or if you just want to avoid toxicity because God knows Marvel Rivals is ripe for it, then sometimes what helps the most might just be turning off all the chats in the settings. I did this recently for my Solo to Grandmaster series because I do play a lot of off-meta heroes and people don't like that, and I felt like it was much easier to focus and play my role when people weren't yapping in my ear about things that really don't matter. So if you feel like the comms in most of your games are nothing but complaining, toxicity, general negativity, or just information that isn't relevant and it's actually distracting you from making the right call, then just leaving all the chats can also be the play for you. That being said, this leads me to the next point, which is that just because you aren't in the chats, that doesn't mean you can't communicate with your team. Pinging is a very strong but honestly underutilized tool, whether you're in a stack or solo queuing, and whether you're communicating or not. If there's one annoying Spider-Man on your backline, you can just ping him and all your teammates will see where he is and they'll be able to focus him. Pinging high impact targets like Hela in her ult, Punisher in his ult, or Scarlet Witch in her ult also makes a huge difference. For some reason, pings also kind of pierce certain blinding abilities like the one for Cloak and Dagger, so actively pinging and focusing the pinged target makes a massive difference. But you don't only have to ping the enemy targets, you can also set up which things you want on your ping wheel. But the default pings are already pretty good on their own. For example, you can either ping to retreat, which is self-explanatory, ping to attack a certain area, which helps communicate where to focus without pinging a specific enemy, or where you want to walk or go, ping that you need healing, which healers ignore all of the time anyways, but it's nice that it's there, and most importantly, you can ping your ultimate status, which lets your team know that you either have your ultimate soon and that you intend to use it, or that you have it and you intend to use it. Generally speaking, using pings seem to get you better results than communicating in text, and sometimes even better results than using voice, especially if you're in Europe. So try to start using them and you will probably see way better team cohesion in your future games. Now, as I said, most of the information in this video is irrelevant whether you're solo queuing or not, but obviously solo queuing in a team heavy game like Marvel Rivals is going to be a lot harder than if you have 1 or 2 friends that you have some synergy with, especially if they're playing roles that normally are unreliable or that really needs cohesion with the heroes that you normally play. But whether you aren't a solo queue player, or maybe you are but you don't want to be anymore, then I really recommend finding a team to play with. Almost every player in the game, if not every single player in the game, gets a significantly higher win rate just from being in a stack versus being in a solo queue team, to the point where ranking up thanks to being in a 2-stack or 3-stack is nearly guaranteed. I have actually made a new channel for you guys to find like-minded grinders in my Discord over at discord.gg/ottr, which I'll probably end up using myself if you're trying to do some fun challenge for a video. And obviously a massive thank you guys for using your nitro boost on the server so we can get that custom URL. And obviously you guys who are looking to join the server, all you have to do is just click the link or type in the URL in your browser, hit join, accept the rules, and then start using the channel. It helps if you type your region, platform, and rank, pick and your main role or heroes. But moving on, something else that is crucially important is the avoid system. The higher ranked you are, or the later in the night it is, or if you're playing in a less populated region, due to the very small amount of players that you run into, the higher impact the avoid system will have. Avoiding a player stops them from showing up on your team, and you can have up to 3 players on your avoid list at a time. If you're in a stack, it might even make sense to try and coordinate your avoids, as you effectively get an additional 3 people that can be avoided at a time per player in the stack. Obviously, there are going to be toxic players that you're going to want to avoid just for being toxic, and there are going to be some griefers that obviously you might want to avoid, but there is a bit of an art in using the avoid function properly. For example, if you're queuing up against a one trick who only plays one specific hero in diamond or above, then you could avoid them and then permanently ban the hero that they play every time as you end up against them. This gives you a much easier game, assuming they can't have as much of an impact on an off roll. Avoiding is especially important to understand since the matchmaker seems to be very win streak or loss streaky, in the sense that it wants to put you on very long win streaks or very long loss streaks, presumably to maximize player retention. The way it seems to do this is by putting you in bad teams or even terrible teams, in bad teams or even terrible teams over and over again to artificially cause that loss streak before flipping and doing the opposite to other players while giving you really good players and wins. I do not know how this works under the hood, but anecdotally, going off the fact that there usually is one trouble teammate in every team when I am on a loss streak, and there seems to be one problem player in the enemy team when I'm on a win streak, the system probably has certain players that they know are going to be a problem, and maybe it only gives them to you when you're on the losers queue. So if you manage to identify who these players are, even if they're on the opposite teams, then avoiding them after they've had a bad game is actually a really good idea. And if you can avoid enough problem players, then there's a higher chance that you might get better teams and get out of that losers queue much faster. You might even be able to avoid it altogether. This isn't really something I can prove with stats or data, but rather my own anecdotal experience, but hey, give it a try and report back how it worked for you. And it's worth mentioning that because of how many people do play this game, you won't really see much of a benefit of avoiding someone unless you immediately queue up afterwards. That being said, if you had a game where an entire team tilted, either on your team or the enemy team, then you might have better results by completely dodging the queue and the players by taking a small break of maybe 5 or 10 minutes. I mean, generally speaking, taking regular breaks will let you play better and with a fresh mind, but we're just talking about avoiding troubled players here rather than what's best for your mental and your physical health. Who cares about that anyways? Ultimately though, consistently winning in Marvel Rivals, whether it's in a stack or solo queue, but especially solo queue, will come down to playing your role perfectly, being the in-game leader or following a good one or just about anyone, and most importantly, using the tools at your disposal, such as your own hero's kit and high impact abilities to secure picks and turn the tides of any fights. In short, get good. If you want to get gooder, make sure to check out the video on the screen for more banger Marvel Rivals content. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.